"Pack your bags, Martinez. You're done here." The words hit Elena Martinez like a physical blow as she stood in the sweltering heat of the Fort Benning training range. Her hands, steady enough to thread a needle in a hurricane, trembled slightly as she set down her rifle. Around her, fellow recruits avoided eye contact, their relief at not being the one dismissed barely concealed behind forced sympathy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sergeant First Class Williams towered over her, his weathered face showing no emotion as he delivered the verdict that would end her dream. The other instructors flanked him like a tribunal, their silence speaking volumes about her performance. Over the past 6 months, failed to qualify on the marksmanship test for the 4th consecutive time. Williams continued, his voice carrying across the range where other soldiers pretended not to listen. Failed to meet minimum standards on the physical fitness assessment. Failed to demonstrate the mental resilience required for sniper training. He paused, letting each word sink in. Some people just aren't cut out for this, Martinez. I wonder where you're watching this story unfold from today. Whether you're in a bustling office in Chicago or a quiet suburban home in Texas, you've probably witnessed someone being told they weren't good enough. Maybe you've been that person yourself. But rarely does failure lead to the kind of extraordinary moment that would define Elena Martinez's legacy. The beginning of the end. Elena had arrived at the U.S. Army Sniper School 6 months earlier with dreams that burned brighter than the Georgia sun. At 24, she was one of only 3 women in her class of 42, a statistic that made her simultaneously proud and terrified. Her slight frame, 5'4", and barely 125 pounds, drew skeptical glances from instructors who were used to training soldiers who looked like they'd been carved from granite. The daughter of immigrants from El Salvador, Elena had grown up in East Los Angeles where gunshots were as common as sirens. Her father, Carlos, worked double shifts at a textile factory while her mother, Maria, cleaned office buildings at night. They had sacrificed everything to give their children opportunities they'd never had, and Elena carried that weight like a sacred burden. "Mia, you don't have to prove anything to anyone," her mother had whispered the night before Elena left for basic training. But Elena knew that wasn't true. In a world that questioned her presence at every turn, she had everything to prove. The early weeks of sniper school had been a brutal awakening. While she excelled in the classroom portion's ballistics calculations, weather reading, range estimation, the practical applications exposed every weakness in her foundation. Her shooting scores hovered consistently below the minimum requirements. Her small frame struggled with the physical demands of carrying heavy equipment across miles of rough terrain. Most damaging of all, her confidence crumbled a little more with each failed attempt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The other recruits fell into 2 categories: those who ignored her completely, and those who offered patronizing encouragement that felt worse than outright hostility. "Don't worry about it, Martinez," one had said after her 3rd failed qualification. "Not everyone's meant for the sharp end of the spear. There's plenty of other jobs in the Army." The pattern of failure. Elena's failures followed a predictable pattern that became increasingly familiar to everyone on the range. She would begin each test with obvious determination, her preparation meticulous and her focus intense. But as the pressure mounted, something would go wrong. A missed wind calculation, a flinch at the critical moment, a rushed shot when time was running out. The instructors had seen it before. Soldiers who possessed all the technical knowledge but couldn't execute when it mattered. What made Elena's case particularly frustrating was that her theoretical understanding was exceptional. She could calculate bullet drop and wind drift faster than most of her male counterparts. She understood the physics of long-range shooting better than recruits who had been hunting since childhood. "It's all up here," Sergeant Williams had told her after her second failed attempt, tapping his temple. "You know what to do, but you're thinking too much. Sniping isn't an academic exercise, Martinez. It's about instinct and muscle memory." But Elena couldn't turn off her analytical mind. Every shot became a complex equation with variables that seemed to multiply under pressure. She would lie behind her rifle, calculating and recalculating until the moment passed and her opportunity was lost. Her physical struggles were equally demoralizing. The standard Army-issue rifle and scope combination weighed nearly 15 pounds, and carrying it during the long-range reconnaissance exercises left her exhausted while her classmates seemed barely winded. The ghillie suit, designed for men with broader shoulders and longer torsos, hung awkwardly on her frame, constantly snagging on vegetation and throwing off her movement. During one particularly grueling field exercise, Elena had fallen behind her patrol by nearly a quarter mile. When she finally reached the designated observation point, her target had already moved, and her mission was marked as a failure. The other soldiers in her unit said nothing, but their glances spoke volumes about their confidence in her abilities. The weight of expectation, the pressure Elena felt wasn't just about personal achievement. She carried the hopes of every woman who wanted to serve in combat roles, every immigrant family that had sacrificed for their children's dreams, and every person who had ever been told they weren't built for something they desperately wanted. To do that, her phone calls home became increasingly difficult. Her parents, who spoke limited English and understood even less about military training, could hear the discouragement in her voice even when she tried to project confidence. "Como van las cosas, Mia?" her father would ask, his voice thick with worry and hope. "Fine, Papa. Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine, and Elena could feel herself drowning in expectations she couldn't meet. The female recruits who had arrived with her were facing their own challenges, but they seemed to be adapting better. Private Jackson, a former police officer from Montana, had qualified on her second attempt and was showing steady improvement in all areas. Private Chun, who had grown up on a ranch in Wyoming, possessed an intuitive understanding of shooting that Elena envied desperately. Elena found herself increasingly isolated, spending her free time alone in the barracks, reviewing training manuals and watching instructional videos on her laptop. Her perfectionist nature, which had served her well in college where she'd graduated summa cum laude with a degree in mathematics, now worked against her. Every mistake was analyzed, cataloged, and worried over until it became a mental scar. Breaking point, the fourth and final qualification attempt, took place on a humid Tuesday morning in late August. The Georgia heat was already oppressive at 0600 hours, and Elena could feel sweat beading on her forehead as she took her position on the range. This was it, her last chance to prove she belonged in one of the Army's most elite programs. The covert course of fire was standard, 10 rounds at various distances from 300 to 1,000 meters, with different target types and time constraints. Elena had shot this same course dozens of times in practice, and she knew exactly what was required. 8 out of 10 hits would qualify her to continue. 7 or fewer would end her dream. She began well, placing her first 3 shots within the required scoring zones. The familiar rhythm of breathing, aiming, and firing felt natural, and for a moment, Elena allowed herself to hope. But as she moved to the longer-range targets, the wind picked up, adding a variable she hadn't anticipated. Her fourth shot missed the target entirely, a humiliating failure that drew muttered comments from the observing instructors. Elena felt her composure cracking, but she forced herself to reset and continue. The fifth shot was marginal, technically a hit, but barely within the scoring ring. The sixth missed again. By the time she reached the final target at 1,000 meters, Elena needed to hit all 4 remaining shots to qualify. The mathematical precision that usually served her so well now worked against her as she calculated the impossibility of her situation. The wind was gusting unpredictably, The mirage was dancing across her scope, and her hands were trembling with a combination of fatigue and desperation. Her 7th shot missed. Her 8th shot missed. Her 9th shot missed. Elena lay behind her, rifle staring through the scope at the distant target that might as well have been on the moon. She had 1 round left, but what was the point? Even if she hit this final shot, she would still fail. The math was simple and brutal. 3 hits out of 10 wasn't even close to qualifying. Still, she took the shot. The bullet struck the target. A small victory in an ocean of failure. The verdict, the formal review, took place in a sterile conference room that smelled of floor wax and disappointment. Elena sat across from a panel of 3 senior NCOs, her training records spread out on the table between them like evidence in a court-martial. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look tired and worn. "Private Martinez," began Master Sergeant Thompson, a 20-year veteran whose own sniper credentials were legendary throughout the Army. "We've reviewed your performance over the past 6 months, and we've reached a unanimous decision." Elena knew what was coming, but she sat at attention, her hands folded in her lap, waiting for the official pronouncement. "Your academic performance has been exemplary," Thompson continued. "Your understanding of the technical aspects of marksmanship is among the best we've seen. Your dedication and work ethic are beyond question." The butt hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. However, Sergeant Williams picked up the narrative. Performance in combat situations requires more than theoretical knowledge. It requires the ability to execute under pressure, to make split-second decisions when lives are on the line, and to demonstrate the physical capabilities necessary for extended operations in hostile environments. Elena had heard variations of this speech before, but it still felt like being slowly cut apart with a dull knife. "In each of these critical areas," Williams continued, "you have failed to meet the minimum standards required for certification as a U.S. Army sniper. While we commend your effort and recognize your potential in other military occupational specialties, we cannot in good conscience recommend you for advancement in this program." Master Sergeant Thompson leaned forward, his expression softening slightly. "This isn't a reflection on your worth as a soldier, Martinez. The sniper program has an 80% failure rate for a reason. Most people who attempt this training don't make it through. There's no shame in that." But Elena felt nothing but shame. 6 months of her life, thousands of dollars in training costs, and the hopes of everyone who had believed in her, all wasted. Because she couldn't hit a target when it mattered. "You'll be reassigned to a different OS," Thompson continued. "Your test scores qualify you for several technical fields where your analytical skills would be highly valued. Intelligence analysis, communications, logistics, all critical roles that contribute to mission success." Elena nodded mechanically, knowing she was expected to accept this consolation gracefully. But inside, she felt like she was dying. This wasn't just about career disappointment. It was about failing to become the person she had dreamed of being. Since she was a child watching war movies with her father, the walk of shame after the official dismissal, Elena had to walk back through the training area to collect her gear. Other recruits were still practicing on the range, the sharp crack of rifle fire punctuating the humid air. She could feel their eyes on her as she passed, some sympathetic, others relieved that it wasn't them facing elimination. Private Chun caught up with her near the barracks. "Elena, I'm sorry. I know how much this meant to you." Elena appreciated the sentiment, but she couldn't trust herself to speak without breaking down completely. She nodded and continued walking, focused on the simple task of putting one foot in front of the other in her room. Elena's few possessions looked pathetic spread out on the narrow bunk. Photos of her family, training manuals she had studied until the pages were worn, a small notebook filled with calculations and observations that would now never be put to practical use. She packed mechanically, trying not to think about the phone call she would have to make to her parents, The other female recruit, Private Jackson, appeared in the doorway. "You're not the first person to wash out of sniper school," she said quietly. "And you won't be the last. This program breaks people who are twice your size and have been shooting since they were kids." "But it didn't break you," Elena replied. Unable to keep the bitterness out of her voice, Jackson was quiet for a moment. "No, it didn't. But that doesn't mean I'm better than you. It just means I was luckier, or the right match for what they're looking for. You've got skills, Elena. They'll be valuable somewhere else." Elena wanted to believe that, but sitting in her sparse room with her dreams crumbling around her, it was hard to see past the immediate failure. She had been so sure that this was her calling, so convinced that her mathematical mind and dedication would overcome any physical limitations. The reality of her inadequacy was a crushing weight that seemed to press down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The long road home, the bus ride to her new assignment at Fort Stewart, felt like a funeral procession. Elena stared out the window at the passing Georgia countryside, seeing nothing but the reflection of her own failure in the glass. Other soldiers on the bus chatted about their assignments, their futures, their plans. Elena remained silent, wrapped in a cocoon of disappointment that seemed impenetrable. Her new MOS would be 3-5 unsignals collector analyst. It was important work, she had been told, critical to intelligence gathering and mission planning. But it wasn't what she had trained for, what she had dreamed of becoming. It felt like a consolation prize, a participation trophy for someone who hadn't been good enough for the real thing. The irony wasn't lost on her that her analytical skills, the same ones that had made her overthink every shot on the range, would now be her primary tool. She would spend her days behind a computer screen instead of behind a rifle scope, analyzing data instead of taking the decisive action she had craved. As the bus pulled into Fort Stewart, Elena caught sight of herself in the window reflection. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her failure. The confident young woman who had reported to sniper school 6 months earlier seemed like a different person entirely. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of disappointment and self-doubt, a small flame of determination still flickered. Elena Martinez had failed at the thing she wanted most, but she was still a soldier. She would find a way to serve, to contribute, to matter. She had to. The story of her failure was ending, but perhaps it was also the beginning of something else entirely. Something that would require all of her analytical skills, all of her determination, and all of the precision that had been so elusive on the sniper range. She just didn't know it yet. As Elena gathered her gear and prepared to step off the bus into her new life, she made herself a promise. This failure would not define her. Somehow, some way, she would find her moment to prove that Sergeant Williams had been wrong. She would show that Elena Martinez was cut out for something extraordinary. She just had no idea that extraordinary moment would come sooner than she could possibly imagine, and in a way that would save more lives than any single sniper shot in military history. 6 months later, Forward Operating Base Anvil, Afghanistan. The intelligence tent at FOB Anvil buzzed with the constant hum of computers and radio chatter. Specialist Elena Martinez sat hunched over 3 monitors, her fingers dancing across multiple keyboards as she analyzed intercepted communications from Taliban forces in the surrounding mountains. The work was meticulous, requiring the same mathematical precision that had once failed her on the shooting range, but now made her invaluable to the intelligence community. "Martinez, I need that pattern analysis on the supply routes," called out Staff Sergeant Davis from across the cramped workspace. "Command wants it in 20 minutes." Elena's eyes never left her screens as she compiled data that had taken her 3 days to decode. Red dots marked enemy positions on a digital map, their movements tracked through a combination of signal intercepts, drone footage, and human intelligence. What she saw made her stomach tighten with concern. "Sergeant, you need to see this," she said quietly. her voice cutting through the ambient noise. The communications intercepts. From the past 72 hours, they're not random chatter. Davis walked over, coffee mug in hand, expecting another routine briefing. But the expression on Elena's face stopped him cold. In 6 months of working together, he had never seen her look so grave. "What are you seeing?" he asked, setting down his mug and leaning over her shoulder to study the screens. Elena pointed to a series of timestamps and frequency patterns she had mapped out. "They're coordinating something big. Look at the timing of these transmissions every 6 hours, exactly. Same encryption pattern, same duration, and the source locations." She highlighted points on the map. "They form a perfect circle around our base." Davis studied the data, his expression growing more serious by the second. "How many hostiles are we talking about?" "Based on the signal strength and transmission patterns, I estimate between 45 and 55 fighters. But Sergeant, that's not the worst part." Elena pulled up another screen showing topographical data overlaid with the enemy positions. "They're not just surrounding us. They're positioned at every possible evacuation route. This isn't a raid, it's a siege." The discovery Elena's analysis painted a terrifying picture. The Taliban had spent weeks positioning fighters in the mountainous terrain around Fob Anvil, using the natural cave systems and rocky outcroppings to remain hidden from drone surveillance. Their communications, which most analysts had dismissed as routine patrol chatter, actually contained coded instructions for a coordinated assault designed to cut off all escape routes and trap the 200 American soldiers at the base. "When?" Davis asked, already reaching for the secure phone to contact the base commander. Elena's fingers flew over her keyboard, cross-referencing the intercepted messages with known Taliban operational patterns. The final confirmation signal was transmitted 47 minutes ago. Based on their previous operations, the wait for optimal conditions, low visibility, minimal air support availability. The weather report shows a storm front moving in tonight. I estimate they'll attack sometime between 0200 and 0400 hours. Davis was already dialing. "Colonel Morrison needs to see this immediately." But as Elena continued her analysis, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. The Taliban weren't just planning to attack, they had inside intelligence about the base's defensive capabilities, patrol schedules, and even the planned helicopter resupply mission scheduled for the following morning. "Sergeant," she called out urgently, "they know about tomorrow's supply run. The transmission I just decoded mentions the birds and gives the exact time window. Someone's been feeding them information." The briefing 20 minutes later, Elena found herself in the base commander's office, surrounded by senior officers whose combined experience spanned decades of warfare. Colonel Morrison, a grizzled veteran of 3 deployments, listened intently as Elena presented her findings on a large monitor. "Specialist Martinez has identified a credible threat to this installation," Morrison announced to the assembled staff. "Elena, walk us through what you've found." For the first time since her failure at sniper school, Elena felt the weight of genuine responsibility. Lives depended on the accuracy of her analysis, on her ability to interpret data correctly and communicate threats effectively. The mathematical precision that had failed her on the range now carried the lives of her fellow soldiers. "Sir, the enemy has positioned approximately 50 fighters in a coordinated pattern around our perimeter," she began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "They've been planning this operation for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. The attack will come tonight, and they have detailed intelligence about our defensive positions." She highlighted key intercepts, showing how seemingly innocent words contained military coordinates and timing instructions. The Taliban had developed an elaborate code using references to livestock, weather, and family members to disguise their tactical communications. "The most concerning aspect," Elena continued, "is that they know about tomorrow's resupply mission. This suggests either electronic surveillance of our communications or human intelligence from within our operational security perimeter. Colonel Morrison studied the data grimly. Recommendations? Immediate lockdown of all non-essential communications. Cancel or significantly alter the timing of the resupply mission. And sir. Elena hesitated, knowing her next words would sound presumptuous coming from a failed sniper. We need to consider a preemptive strike. Their positioning is actually their weakness. They're concentrated in a defensive pattern that leaves them vulnerable to coordinated counterattack. The plan the next 4 hours transformed Fob Anvil into a fortress preparing for siege. Elena's intelligence became the foundation for a defensive strategy that would either save lives or doom them all. Her detailed analysis of enemy positions allowed the base's defenders to prepare targeted responses, while her timeline predictions gave them crucial hours to prepare. But as evening approached, Elena made a discovery that changed everything. While monitoring the final Taliban communications before the expected communications blackout, she intercepted a transmission that made her hands freeze over her keyboard. Hidden within what appeared to be a routine check-in was a detailed description of the base's new defensive preparations that had been implemented only hours earlier based on her intelligence. "They know," she whispered, then louder. "Sergeant Davis, they know we're ready for them." The implications were staggering. Not only did the Taliban have advanced intelligence about the base's normal operations, but they had real-time intelligence about the defensive changes being made in response to Elena's discoveries. Someone was feeding them information as it happened. Elena's mind raced through the possibilities. The source had to be someone with access to the command briefings, someone who knew about her analysis and the subsequent defensive preparations. The list of suspects was terrifyingly short and included people she worked with every day. The revelation, as Elena dove deeper into the communication patterns, she discovered something that made her stomach drop. The timing of the intelligence leaks correlated exactly with the work schedules of the intelligence section itself. Every piece of information that had been compromised was something that had been discussed in their workspace. But more damning was what she found in the metadata of the base's own communication logs. Someone had been using the intelligence section's equipment to send encrypted messages during off-duty hours, messages that were routed through civilian networks to disguise their origin. Elena's mathematical mind saw the pattern clearly. The unauthorized transmissions always occurred exactly 37 minutes after major briefings, enough time to compile and encode the information, but following a precise pattern that suggested systematic intelligence gathering rather than random leaks. Cross-referencing access logs with transmission times, Elena identified the source of the leak. The discovery hit her like a physical blow. Private First Class Rodriguez, who worked the night shift in intelligence and had been one of the few people to show her kindness after her arrival from the failed sniper program. The confrontation. Elena found Rodriguez at his station during the shift change, methodically working through routine intercepts with the same attention to detail that had made him an effective analyst. For a moment, she questioned her own conclusions. This was someone who had shared coffee with her during long nights, who had helped her understand the informal social networks that kept the intelligence section functioning. "Working late again?" Rodriguez asked without looking up from his screens. "You should get some rest before things get crazy tonight." Elena sat down at the workstation next to his, her heart pounding. "Manuel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." Something in her tone made him look up. His expression shifted from friendly concern to wariness as he studied her face. "The intelligence leaks," Elena continued, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "I know it's you." Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, his hands still resting on his keyboard. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "How long have you known?" "I figured it out 3 hours ago. The transmission patterns." The timing correlations, the access logs, it all points to you. Elena leaned forward. What I don't understand is why. Rodriguez's shoulders sagged as the weight of his secret finally became too much to bear. My sister, he said quietly. They have my sister in Kabul. She was visiting cousins when the Taliban took control of her neighborhood. They said they'd kill her unless I provided information. Elena felt a stab of sympathy, even as she grappled with the implications. Manuel, they're going to attack tonight. They're going to try to kill everyone on this base. I never gave them anything that would help them attack, Rodriguez said desperately. Just defensive positions, patrol routes, supply schedules. I thought ... I thought they just wanted to avoid contact. They used your information to plan a siege, Elena said. Firmly, 50 fighters are positioned around this base right now because of intelligence you provided. And now they know we're ready for them. The decision Elena faced an impossible choice. Reporting Rodriguez would trigger a security lockdown that would delay the base's defensive preparations at the worst possible moment. But keeping his secret made her complicit in the betrayal that had endangered everyone she served with. You have to help me stop this, she told him. You know their communication patterns, their protocols. There has to be a way to feed them false information. Rodriguez looked up sharply. What are you thinking? Elena's mind was already working through the possibilities, applying the same analytical approach that had made her excel in intelligence. Work. They trust your intelligence because it's been accurate. If we can make them believe our defensive preparations are different from what they actually are, we might be able to turn their own strategy against them. That's incredibly dangerous, Rodriguez said. If they figure out the intelligence is false ... Your sister dies, Elena finished. I understand. But if we do nothing, 200 American soldiers die tonight. And your sister probably dies anyway once you're no longer useful to them. The weight of the decision showed on Rodriguez's face. Elena could see him struggling between loyalty to his family and duty to his fellow soldiers. Finally, he nodded. What do you need me to do? The deception working together, Elena and Rodriguez crafted a series of false intelligence reports that painted a picture of chaos and confusion within the base's defensive preparations. They described fictional equipment failures, conflicting orders from command, and defensive positions that were actually decoy setups designed to draw attackers into predetermined kill zones. The most crucial deception involved the timing of the expected attack. Through carefully crafted communications, they made the Taliban believe that the base expected an assault at dawn rather than in the pre-dawn hours Elena had actually predicted. This would cause the attackers to adjust their timeline, potentially disrupting their coordination and giving the defenders additional advantages. This has to be perfect, Elena told Rodriguez as they prepared the final transmission. One inconsistency, one detail that doesn't match their expectations, and they'll know it's false. Rodriguez encoded the message using the same protocols he had used for his previous intelligence leaks, ensuring the Taliban would have no reason to question its authenticity. As he prepared to transmit, his hands shook slightly. Elena, he said quietly, if this goes wrong ... It won't, she replied with more confidence than she felt. The mathematics work out. Their positioning, their timing, their expectations, we can use all of it against them. The false intelligence was transmitted at 2,147 hours. Elena and Rodriguez returned to their normal duties, monitoring legitimate intercepts and maintaining the appearance of routine operations while secretly watching for signs that their deception had been accepted. At 2,234 hours, they intercepted a Taliban communication that made Elena's heart race. The attackers were adjusting their timeline based on the false intelligence, pushing their assault back by 2 hours to take advantage of what they believed would be confusion in the base's defensive preparations. It's working, Rodriguez whispered. But Elena was already focused on the next phase of her plan. The time delay gave the base defenders a crucial advantage, but Elena realized she could do more than just disrupt the attack timing. Her analysis of the Taliban communication patterns had revealed something that even the attackers might not fully understand. Their positioning created a tactical vulnerability that could be exploited with precise coordination. The opportunity at 130 hours, as the base's defenders waited in prepared positions for an attack that would now come later than expected, Elena made a discovery that would change everything. While monitoring the Taliban's final preparation communications, she detected a pattern that revealed the location of their command post. The mathematics were elegant in their simplicity. By analyzing the signal strength and transmission delays of intercepted communications, Elena was able to triangulate the exact position of the Taliban field commander who was coordinating the attack. He was positioned in a cave system approximately 1,200 meters from the base, at an elevation that gave him visual oversight of the entire battlefield. More importantly, Elena realized that the commander's position was the critical node in the Taliban's communication network. All tactical instructions flowed through his location, and all field units reported back to him for coordination. If that single position could be neutralized, the entire attack would collapse into confusion. "I need to talk to Colonel Morrison," Elena told Rodriguez urgently, "right now." The shot 20 minutes later, Elena found herself in a position she had never imagined, lying behind a Barrett M82.50 caliber sniper rifle on the base's highest observation tower, with Colonel Morrison himself acting as her spotter. "Specialist, are you absolutely certain about this?" Morrison asked as Elena adjusted the scope for the 1,200-meter shot. "If you miss, you'll give away our position and alert them that we know about their command post." Elena's hands were steady as she made final adjustments to the rifle. After 6 months of intelligence work, she understood the enemy's patterns, their positioning, their vulnerabilities in ways that even experienced snipers might not. This wasn't about marksmanship technique or muscle memory. This was about mathematical precision applied to a single crucial moment. "Sir, the wind is steady at 8 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature is 67 degrees, humidity at 74%. The target is stationary in a fixed position." Elena's voice was calm, analytical. The mathematics are perfect. She had spent the previous hour calculating every variable: bullet drop over distance, wind drift, atmospheric pressure, even the slight difference in elevation between her position and the target. This was the same mathematical precision that had paralyzed her during sniper school, but now it served a different purpose. She wasn't trying to pass a test, she was trying to save lives. Through the scope, Elena could see the cave entrance where the Taliban commander was positioned. Intelligence intercepts indicated he was currently coordinating final preparations with his field units, making him a stationary target for the next few minutes. "One shot," Elena whispered to herself, remembering her father's words about precision. "Being more important than power. Make it count." The mathematics of precision. Elena's finger rested on the trigger as her mind processed the final calculations. At 1,200 meters, the .50 caliber round would drop approximately 18 feet from its initial trajectory. The northwest wind would push it 14 inches to the right. The slight upward angle of her shot would reduce the effective range by approximately 3 meters, but Elena had calculated for all of these variables and more. She had factored in the rifle's specific ballistic characteristics, the ammunition's manufacturing tolerances, even the minute vibrations caused by the observation tower's metal structure. This wasn't the panicked overthinking that had plagued her during sniper school. This was cold, precise analysis applied to a problem that had a mathematical solution. The target wasn't just a cave entrance, it was a specific coordinate in 3-dimensional space that could be reached by a projectile following a precise ballistic trajectory. Elena took a breath, let half of it out, and squeezed the trigger with the same deliberate pressure she had practiced thousands of times on the range. The impact, the .50 caliber round, traveled at 2,910 feet per second, covering the 1,200 meters to target in approximately 1.3 seconds. Elena remained behind the scope, watching through the night vision optics as the round impacted exactly where her calculations had predicted. The result was devastating and immediate. The high-explosive round detonated inside the cave system where the Taliban commander had established his position. But Elena had unknowingly targeted something far more significant than a single individual, unknown to the base's intelligence. The Taliban had stored their ammunition and explosives in the same cave complex as their command post. Elena's single round triggered a secondary explosion that lit up the mountainside like daylight, the blast echoing across the valley for nearly 30 seconds. Jesus Christ, Morrison breathed as they watched the massive fireball climbing into the night sky. What the hell did you hit? Elena was already back on her scope, scanning the surrounding positions where Taliban fighters had been concealed. Through her night vision, she could see figures running in all directions, their careful positioning abandoned as the explosion eliminated their command structure and ammunition supplies simultaneously. The aftermath. Intercept stations immediately came alive with panicked Taliban communications. Without their commander and with their ammunition depot destroyed, the carefully coordinated attack dissolved into chaos. Individual fighters began withdrawing from their positions, some abandoning their weapons in their haste to escape the area. All units report. Colonel Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. What are you seeing out there? The responses came in rapid succession from observation posts around the base perimeter. Up north, multiple individuals fleeing north along ridgeline, no hostile fire. Up east, large group moving away from base, heading toward Pakistan border. Up south, all quiet, no movement detected. Elena remained at her position, continuing to observe through the rifle scope as the Taliban siege dissolved before her eyes. Her single shot had not just eliminated the enemy commander, it had destroyed their operational capability and shattered their morale in a way that would end the threat entirely. The count, over the next 6 hours, as daylight revealed the full scope of Elena's impact, the true magnitude of her achievement became clear. Intelligence analysts working with special operations teams inserted into the area confirmed that the cave complex had contained not just the Taliban commander, but also his senior lieutenants who had gathered for final coordination. The secondary explosion had killed a total of 17 Taliban fighters who were in or near the command post. But more significantly, the destruction of their ammunition depot and command structure caused the remaining fighters to abandon their mission entirely. Drone surveillance tracked 33 additional fighters withdrawing from the area, their siege plans completely abandoned. 50 fighters neutralized with a single shot, Master Sergeant Thompson said when he called from Fort Benning to congratulate Elena. That's not just marksmanship, specialist. That's strategic impact. Elena found the irony bitter and perfect. She had failed to hit stationary targets on a qualification range. But when the mathematics truly mattered, when lives depended on precision rather than performance, her analytical mind had delivered exactly what was needed: the recognition. The story of Elena Martinez's shot spread through military intelligence circles with the speed of legend. A failed sniper candidate who had used mathematical analysis to identify a terrorist threat, exposed an intelligence leak, and then eliminated 50 enemy fighters with a single precisely calculated shot. Colonel Morrison submitted Elena for the Silver Star, noting in his recommendation that her actions had prevented a significant enemy attack through superior intelligence analysis and exceptional marksmanship under combat conditions. The award citation would eventually read that Specialist Martinez had demonstrated extraordinary heroism in action against an armed enemy of the United States. But for Elena, the recognition was secondary to a deeper realization. Her failure at sniper school hadn't been a failure at all. It had been preparation for a different kind of precision, one that combined analytical thinking with tactical action in ways the traditional sniper training had never contemplated. The phone call home 3 days after the attack that never came. Elena finally made the phone call she had been dreading since her arrival at Fob Anvil. Her parents' voices, crackled through the satellite connection, carried the same worry and hope they had expressed months earlier. "Mia, are you safe?" her mother asked. "We heard on the news about fighting in your area." Elena smiled, thinking about how to explain what had happened without revealing operational details. "I'm safe, Mama. More than safe. I think I finally figured out what I'm supposed to be doing here." Her father's voice came through clearly. "Estás bien? You sound different." Elena was different. The young woman who had left sniper school in defeat had become someone who understood that precision came in many forms. Sometimes it was about hitting a target on a range. Sometimes it was about analyzing patterns in data. And sometimes it was about using mathematical certainty to save lives when it mattered most. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Papa, and I think you'd be proud of what your daughter can do with numbers." The legacy Elena Martinez never returned to sniper school. She didn't need to. Her single shot had proven something more valuable than any qualification score, that precision, properly applied, could change the course of history. She remained in military intelligence, eventually becoming one of the Army's most respected analysts. Her methods, combining mathematical analysis with tactical thinking, became part of the training curriculum for intelligence specialists throughout the military. Rodriguez was quietly transferred to a different assignment after helping expose the intelligence leak that had nearly doomed Fob Anvil. His sister was eventually rescued by Special Operations Forces, who used Elena's analytical methods to track down her captors. The two soldiers never spoke again, but Elena knew that his choice to help stop the attack had taken more courage than anything she had done behind a rifle. Years later, when Elena was asked about the shot that killed 50 terrorists, she would always redirect the conversation to the mathematics. "It wasn't about being a great shooter," she would explain. "It was about understanding that precision is more powerful than force, and that sometimes the most important battles are won by thinking clearly under pressure." But late at night, when she was alone with her thoughts, Elena would remember the moment when her finger squeezed the trigger and mathematics became reality. She had failed every test that mattered at sniper school, but when it truly counted, when lives hung in the balance, her precision had been perfect. The failed sniper had become something better, a soldier who proved that the right shot, at the right time, calculated with mathematical certainty, could save more lives than a lifetime of perfect qualification scores. And somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, a cave system that had once threatened 200 American soldiers remained silent. A testament to what happens when analytical precision meets decisive action in the hands of someone who refused to let failure define her capabilities. Elena Martinez had found her moment, and it was exactly what she had been preparing for all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.